Well, welcome to another episode of the Evo podcast. And you want to do one of these in a pub?
Yes, I do. They should all be done in pubs. A pubcast.
Welcome to the next episode of the Evo podcast, which we've decided is episode 10, or part 2 of eCoty, as we're going to call it as well. So if you listen to part 1, we were very reflective of where eCoty started, our highs and lows, our best ones, our favourite cars. And so this episode, we're going to talk about 2024 Evo Car of the Year that is in the shops now. And this podcast is going up the same day as our YouTube film as well. So don't forget to watch that after you've listened to us ramble on about what we did this year. For this episode, I'm joined by Dickie, Meaden and John Barker. And in the two hot seats for this episode, we have Henry Catchpole.
Hello.
And we have James Taylor.
Hello.
Both wearing their lovely Evo merch. As is John, which he just borrowed off my desk. So don't ask what's underneath it. It's been a long day. Right, eCoty 2024, where do we start? Where did we go and why did we go there? James?
We've been in the UK since COVID, so it was time to kind of venture abroad once again. So we were on the kind of Spain-France border in the Pyrenees and also in the Navarra region, partly because of the Navarra circuit. So we spent a day on track with all of the cars, and the days on road were genuinely some of the most beautiful roads I've ever driven on in my life. I mean, you guys have been driven on some pretty amazing locations, but that was right up there for me. So yeah, it was a real chance to spread the wings and stretch the car's legs a bit.
Because you've helped us with the location, Henry, because you've done a few jobs there, films and stills and drive stories. What was your sort of idea of us heading to that region? What stands out in that part of the world for you?
Pyrenees is just great because it's so there's nobody up there for a start. The roads are fantastic and they just go on and on and on. It's not just one little stretch of road. And being on the Spanish-French border is really interesting as well because you've got the sort of quite different characters of the road. Almost as soon as you go across the border, it changes, which is really nice because obviously they suit different cars in different ways. There's a good long drive, obviously, from where we stayed to get to the roads each day, which is always, we talked about before, is always really nice for having that sort of convoy of cars and stuff. And yeah, it's just, the scenery is unbelievably good up there. And yeah, what more could you want, really?
And John, you'd been there before and hadn't realised, a bit like Dickie had forgotten he'd been on a Car of the Year until we showed him a picture of him there, the evidence. Yeah. But you'd been there for a very different reason, hadn't you?
Yeah, well, I'd been to Navarra. I remember I'd been to Navarra because we used that as the original F-Type launch was in that area, out of Pamplona, where we were on the outskirts of Pamplona. And I didn't realise I'd been all the way up to where we ended up doing most of our photos, up into the Pyrenees, until I got there and I recognised the cafe and then looked back and recognised the view. So we must have come at it from a different angle. So yeah, that was F-Type launch, which ended up being a lot of miles for everybody because everything's so far apart. But everybody loved it because it gave them so much time in the car. So yeah, it was good for us as well.
Yeah, it was that drive, wasn't it? To your point, that in the morning we were on the outskirts of Pamplona, so it was a good trek up to the top of the hill, and it had every variation of road, didn't it? A bit of auto via, sort of what we would probably class as A roads, and then those B roads running up to the top of the location.
You quickly, Spain is quite a strange place in many ways, isn't it? It seems the scale of it is disproportionately much bigger than other European countries, and you seem to get yourself into kind of wilderness areas quite quickly, which sort of suits what we want to do, doesn't it? So we're out on our own. But I was amazed by it. I'd never driven those roads before, and the change in character and just the amount of time you can spend in a car driving quickly with no interruptions, and it's just brilliant. Absolutely
there was some great variation, wasn't there? It was, if you're at the very top, it was, it's an alpine pass, really, isn't it?
But with really good ridge road, you do the zigzaggy climb, and then you've got really fast open ridge roads, and then drop off, and then down into the valley, and then you've got some really fast kind of flowing valley roads as well. with different surfaces, and they're different night to day as well. Somehow you get a different read of them. So and we were leaving very early in the morning, weren't we? So we'd leave in the dark, get the violins out, and then and then we'd get back. We'd drive back in the dark as well. But it would start to get light and start to get dark. So it's a bit like doing an endurance race or something. You do the same stretch in different light conditions. It was really, really cool.
Petrol station in just about the right place as well, which is always
the most bizarre petrol station, wasn't it? Because it was middle of nowhere, sort of hanging off the side of a sort of bit of a ravine with the valley floor, wasn't it? And then it had bags of Haribo, or you can go and have a glass of Rioja. And
they were all drinking Calvados for breakfast, weren't they? Seemingly.
And it had all the little scale models of rally cars behind the counter as well.
Yeah, and then the locals, sort of the one morning when I was in there, it was all the sort of tree surgeons stuff, filling up their chainsaws and getting ready for a day of felling stuff. And it was, and farmers coming in. It was bizarre.
What was quite cool was the girl who was taking the money for the fuel, not a flicker of interest in any of the cars. And the cars looked pretty spectacular, yellow, green. We had all...
It seemed to be like the local hangout for breakfast and coffee, because it was a tiny little village it was attached to, but the whole population of that village seemed to be in there having breakfast.
And I'm pretty sure there were some people who just spent all day in there, because they were there in the morning and they were there in the evening.
Coffee, then Rioja.
But it was a spectacular part of the world that we've done bits and pieces. I think you did a M3, M4 GTS shoot.
Which in fact we caught the ferry down to Santander for that, and then did a shoot in that area and a couple of other roads as well. Saw loads of vultures down there. We only saw a couple this time, but last time we were there, it's extraordinary how many, I think it's griffin vultures down there, and they are absolutely enormous.
The wildlife generally there was pretty amazing.
It was a bit like being on Clarkson's farm sometimes, wasn't it? Cattle and sheep and all kinds of things.
Merged Grand Tour and Clarkson's farm.
So the cars this year as well, we had quite an eclectic mix, I felt. There was 9 in total, and they went from I think what some people might think as an antiquated 60s classic to the latest supercar. So
Ford Mustang.
Don't give the result away, John. What did we have?
We had Artura, didn't we? So we had a hybrid supercar at one end, and then we had Morgan +4, which is changed significantly since the 90s, but it's still that vibe, isn't it? And then pretty much everything in between.
We had a hot hatch in the Gen 2 Yaris, a fast estate car, which I don't think we've had for a long time. The RS6 GT, which I think is in people's notes and in the copy, it's the car the photographers would all want, but us as judges normally you wouldn't go towards it and sort of use it for
that was one of those
home.
cars that came. We drove it quite late, didn't we? We'd sort of got it as a if it's good, we'll include it, but it was a pretty late call, wasn't it?
Yes, and you drove it.
I drove it a month or so before.
Only a month before. We came back from another job, didn't we? And it was beginning of September, and we went out to do Car of the Year last weekend of September, first week of October. So it was a late call to include it.
It was really good. It sort of had a very sort of reminiscent of an M5 CS about it, certainly on the UK roads that we drove before we went to Spain. So it was great to be able to include that just for a totally different shape, size, character of car.
Yeah, and then we had M4 CS, talking to BMW. So that was BMW sort of looking for, having won it twice with the CS before, and the M3 last year sort of left us all a bit kind of non-plus, wasn't it? It was good in areas, but
very specific.
Very specific set of circumstances. Porsche 911 ST, which
not many of us had driven that. I certainly haven't.
No, James has spent a lot of time in it, hadn't you? And you said it was after the GT3 RS last year and Car of the Year and Track Car of the Year. You came back every time you drove an ST of this is really good. And I think there's a few of us that are going, but it's just bits of other cars.
Yeah, we thought long and hard over should we actually include this car, because A, it's sold out, B, it was, even though it's sold out, £230,000, which is a huge sum of money. We'd already had a variant of the GT3 family win last year, so we did a bit of soul searching as to whether to include it. But if the test is about the greatest drivers' cars launched in the last 12 months, for me that was absolutely up there, and it also gave a real sort of rare exotic car for the mix to go with the hot hatch, the estate car, the muscle cars, and the other sports cars.
Yeah, talking of muscle cars, we kind of had two.
Two, really, yeah.
So there's the traditional, the Mustang Dark Horse that we had, and Aston Martin Vantage.
That's a proper hot rod, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that car?
proper hot rod car. More so than the Mustang, whether that's perception. We're going to go into what we thought of each car in more detail, but there was some bizarre kind of, actually that's better at doing what that car's meant to be doing, wasn't it?
Yeah, two pretty different takes on a V8.
It was almost a trio because the M4 CS BMW felt sort of that ilk as well, so they became this sort of unlikely trio of muscle
Bavarian
car
Mustangs.
And then there was the latest MX-5, which we had in RF form as well, which
that was the wild card.
Was
and that was another late car call, wasn't it?
Late car, yeah, that was one that you called us again, wasn't it?
Only because of this when we received the press release, and we touched on this with our Japanese car podcast way back when, but it had all the hallmarks of a car that's properly been honed and tweaked, and it was all just the little adjustments and quite costly little additions that all the engineers would have wanted to do. It just felt like it might be quite a special little car.
And what intrigued me, it's the first time that an MX-5 has been in a final Evo car. It's been on when in the past, when we've done part one, sort of a real world test, MX-5s have been included, but they never made it through to the final. And obviously we haven't done that format this year, but to include it straight off the bat, as you say, it's that intrigue of, it's already a good car and they've done this.
I think we'd done a little bit of diligence, hadn't we, because we'd driven one in the UK.
Yeah, we had the car for a bit before the test.
Quite a few of us had driven it, and it felt like it was really impressive. So it wasn't like we were just throwing it in and hoping for the best. But equally, when you put a car in like that against some of the top end stuff we had, it doesn't always end particularly well, does it, for the underdog stuff?
No, it was a broad mix, wasn't it? I think it was when you saw them all lined up, isn't it? It's always that first morning. Because cars came, we had manufacturers truck them down for us, or a couple of colleagues went down to Madrid to pick up the RS6 GT and the Mustang that were there, and the Yaris had been driven out by someone for us, and the Mazda had driven out the MX-5. But it's that first morning, isn't it? You walk out into the car park and it's...
it has that Evo Car of the Year appeal, doesn't it? Of that different shapes and variety and stuff. Which
that's
you
one
can't
of my
have in any other test. So.
Favourite bits, I think, of any car of the year is when that first morning when everyone's out and you sort of, who's having what? And you've kind of got the one you're angling to drive, and everyone sort of tries to manoeuvre themselves into
being very British. I don't
no, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's quite a nice feeling, that, isn't it? And then we all sort of head off, and particularly this one because headlights, and it's quite an evocative moment, isn't it? Really.
When we reached our first sort of waypoint, I suppose, was quite cool because they looked like toy cars in a sort of landscape and
like a diorama sort of thing. Yeah.
Should we go through each car? Let's do it alphabetically because that's probably going to trip us up.
We're gonna, that'll last for the first car.
Get the alphabetical list here if that helps.
So let's go back to the RS6 GT. Imagine working with this lot on deadline week. Audi RS6 GT.
Surely the Aston should be first.
So I think you'll find.
See if you're paying attention. We'll start with the Aston Martin then, Henry.
Oh God. Aston Martin. Let's talk about the Aston Martin.
Let's talk about the Vantage.
Yeah.
So Vantage, all three of you had driven that before Car of the Year this year on the international launch. What did we think of it this year? It scored very well. We'll get to the scores at the end, but it did well. I think there was sort of a common thread and theme through that, wasn't there, of why it did so well?
I think it's just a symbol of Aston Martin's reinvention, isn't it? We had DB12 last year.
Yeah.
I think Vantage is always a slightly clearer proposition, maybe, in what it needs to set out to do. And it's whenever you look at the car and then you look back at the spec, and it's 680 horsepower. It seems like it's a proper hot rod of a thing, which sounds derogatory because it sounds like it's rough around the edges, and it's not. But it was the car that always felt fast to me. Whenever I got in it kind of makes you catch your breath because it's so explosively quick, and I love that about it. I think it's like a proper return to what Aston was always good at, I think.
And it just looks so good.
Yeah,
doesn't it? It's kind of like the looks of that car are. I know that's not what eCoty is about.
No.
But
It's part of the
walking up
occasion,
to it,
though, isn't
yeah,
it?
absolutely.
It puts you in that right mind frame, doesn't it?
Up in the car park at the top, the light, the scenery was surreal. It was almost, HD plus. The clarity was amazing in the light, and the Aston looked phenomenal in
Yeah, it
that
was
colour.
catching all of that light, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
and the shape looked really good as well.
When you walk into a department store and you've got all the television showing sort of the best possible bit of scenery with the sort of the most, that's kind of what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it was. I think everyone when they got out of it the first time they drove it, it was positive. I think. Whereas last year on the DB12, there was always that hesitancy. The first time you drove it, the second, it took a while to try and understand what Aston were trying to do with that car or where it was positioned. Whereas the Vantage, you seemed to know exactly what they wanted it to be, and it felt like that the first time we all drove it, didn't it? It felt really. It felt like a hot rod and a muscle car, but it also was a. Remember the first morning I drove it second morning to the location. So I was late leaving because it needed fuel. But just on the motorway section, it just felt like a proper GT car, more so than the DB12. But then when you started to get up to the run up to the location, it just did its other thing. It did its sort of driver's supercar sort of role, didn't it? It just seemed to gel from the off.
Yeah, I think it's quite a challenge because it's got so much power and so much
But it doesn't dominate, does it? It doesn't. It's not the
No,
sole.
I think you need to build your confidence with it slightly.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't have as much confidence straight away
Because it feels quite
there's a lot of grip as well,
big
isn't
and
there?
grippy, and you're never quite sure initially how it was going to communicate how close you are to its limit. But
And
once
it's a lot
you've
wider than the old car, physically wider. It's like 6 centimetres wider, I think.
once you've worked your way up to that, and you can really use the traction control to good effect as well, so you can build your confidence without feeling like you've got no safety net. But yeah, I think it's a pretty serious piece of kit. You had to treat it with most respect, I would say.
Yeah,
that traction control system's so helpful, isn't it? The way it's literally a click wheel to click around how much or how little assistance you want, but without it, it is fairly wild.
Yeah, you can sort of move around at will, can't it? Or just spit you off if you're not paying attention. But it's interesting because you went out to drive the Vanquish the week after.
Yes.
On the launch, and you've come back saying the Vanquish is a 5-star car and fantastic. How do you think it would have dealt this year against the Vantage? Or
I think it would have done very well. I think there's more character in the V12. I think the V8 is a real punchy, powerhouse of an engine, but a little bit rough. Just a little bit sort of loses its voice a little bit the higher it gets. Whereas the V12 just gets better. So you've always got that lovely V12 noise to get into. And the roads, well, Henry was there as well, but the roads in Sardinia, pretty much like the worst roads that we found up in the Pyrenees, and it copes with that so well. It does the duality even better, I think, than DB12 or Vantage. So, I mean, I know it's a £330,000 car, so it should be better, but I think it actually nails the brief. Nails the brief. It's exactly what you want that car to be. Effortless performance, real character when you want it, calm and smooth when you just want to travel distance.
It's such a wholesale change for them as well, isn't it, compared to the previous model range and with quite a lot of new technology with the dampers and all the traction control stuff, and the powertrains are much, much, much more potent than they were. So you sort of sense they've kind of put the cards out, and then they can start
those Bilstein dampers are
differentiating or tuning more. But I think as a range of cars, it's pretty compelling. Anyway, we're slightly off topic here.
My first go in the Vantage was I was hacking along, got to the petrol station, Roncal Valley, so it all does that. And I then followed you. You were in the MX-5, and it was the first indication that the MX-5 might not actually be the run at the back, the bottom of the list, because you went off and you went peeled into the first corner. I could almost see the underside of the car as you went into the first left-hander, and I was thinking, "Oh, hang on a second, I'm going to have my work cut out here, keeping up with you." So yeah, that was quite interesting. They're two completely different cars.
So different,
but that's the joy of Car of the Year. You
We
get
should probably forget the alphabetical thing, move on to the MX-5 maybe, because it was like having a character from Cars in Car of the Year, wasn't it? Because it just was such an expressive. It was as much fun to watch it, either in your mirrors or in front of you, as it was to drive, because you knew how much fun that person was having. It was massively annoying if you were in something that should be tearing off down the road and leaving it for dead. But it was a constant reminder. A of why we do Car of the Year, and B that there's only so much performance you can use on the road.
I think it was the second evening I'd gone off ahead in the M4, thinking, wow, this great drive on your own, and then there's just all these headlights, 2 pairs of headlights coming. I had making progress. Oh, it must be Dickie and James and something. And it was you in the ST trying to keep up with him in the MX-5.
Yeah.
And it's that thing got to the petrol station, and it's like, right, John, get out the MX-5. I want to go in that. And it was just, it was.
That was such a good drive though, because we went down off the mountain and it's quickly into the switchbacks.
Because you went past me because I was trying to save fuel to get to the basically coasting off the mountain.
You were in the Aston,
the Mustang or the Vantage?
I think it was the Vantage because it had no fuel. It literally had sort of
a recurring theme.
So we went past you, and I went into the first hairpin, keenly, and I thought I'm not near the limit yet. So it just got faster and faster into the hairpins, and it's really well balanced. It doesn't front or rear. It does it all together.
Yeah.
And then when we got down onto the valley, I thought, Dickie will be coming past any second. But you hung back behind me. And then you get into that lovely flow of road all the way to the petrol station, which is like another 15, 20 minutes.
I didn't want to go any faster. And you see a car that like if you had a data trace or something, your minimum speed versus your peak speed, whatever that might be, there'd be the smallest amount of difference between the two, whereas the Aston or the Porsche or the McLaren you have these big spikes of acceleration, but then you don't have that satisfaction of just peeling into blending out of the throttle and then into a corner. It's a much more spiky progress, isn't it?
But I think we all got to that point with the MX-5.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where you just get into the rhythm, into the flow of it. And
totally trust it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so friendly on the limit, isn't it? It doesn't do anything.
But you can,
horrible.
you just, it makes you feel like a good driver because you're actually reading the road so that you don't have to brake. How much speed can I carry in? And you peel into a corner. And if you have taken a little bit too much speed, you don't hit the brakes. You just maybe steer a bit more or back off a little bit and it adjusts itself and on you go again. So
that wonderful weight transfer that you're just in the whole time managing it, and you've got all the tools to do that because the steering's definitely better than the earlier ND MX-5s. That's what sort of extra weight stuff. That's what kind of really set it apart.
You got the diff as well. That's just elevated the car to the best. I think it's the best MX-5 probably since the first one.
Because it wasn't a nostalgic trip, was it? Oh, it's small and light, therefore that's why we're liking it in a world of 600 horsepower plus cars.
Well, it was genuinely all the good things, wasn't it? It's a car with really good steering, really good balance of power and torque to weight, and it's very small, and it's very light, and it's manual, and it's
a really good manual.
Yeah, all of those things.
The nicest gearbox of the test, actually.
And now you maybe have cars with one or two of those things, but very, very few will have that blend.
The only thing I think the only negative that was a bit of a theme was it just didn't sound great. But
needs a filter and a couple of holes in the exhaust.
That's exactly, but that can be remedied quite easily, can't it? But that sort of kind of tells you that that's how good the car is because you're picking up on things. Oh, well, the induction noise isn't great and the exhaust noise isn't great, and that's the only thing. But they're things that can be remedied. It's not as if if it had slightly better damping or roll control.
I think that's it. You kind of, because it's actually quite modest, isn't it? Oh, maybe you could, and because it's Japanese, you could maybe tweak this or tweak that, and then think. No. But it wouldn't be. It would look better if you sat it down and slightly fatter tyres, but it would ruin it. You have to just leave it alone, and enjoy it.
It's all so beautifully balanced, isn't it? The whole thing.
Yeah, no, it's a really super cool little thing.
Yeah,
and one other thing, unlike all the other cars there, basically, to actually turn off all the annoying systems,
It was
Yeah.
a button.
was one button
Yeah.
there, which
Yeah,
was
all the
which
ADAS
kind of
stuff
unlike the
and-
Aston
yeah.
Martin, where you could never find out how on earth to do it,
Or see
sort
it
of-
on the
yeah,
display.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
think, one more thing on the MX-5. It has everything you need in it. It's got air conditioning, it's got electric windows.
Yeah.
You know, you're not wanting for anything.
Yeah, good seats, isn't it? Yeah, those. it
Yeah,
just
you'd have a
held you.
daily driver, and it's if you don't need the space, this space is the only limitation, and it's a 2-seat sports car. So, in every other respect, it's a remarkable little thing, really.
Yeah. In complete contrast to it, which was also a 2-seater open top, was the Artura Spider.
I thought you were saying all.
Always in contrast.
Yeah, no,
We don't
absolutely.
keep this easy. Yeah, that is the complete opposite end. Modern 21st century hybrid supercar, isn't
You
it?
say completely different, but
A lot of
It has-
the attributes are similar, aren't they, in those
it's
two cars?
terrific ride quality, unfazable dynamics. You know, you come across, stuff a lot quicker, and if you've misjudged the corner, it's not really a problem as long as you're not being crazy. It will look after you quite well. So, and again, it's quite a well balanced car.
And you could get into a flow with it, couldn't you? Even though it's missile fast, it's still
Yeah,
And that car was an example of quite a few of the cars in this year's test. It was an update of an existing model. So we had Artura Coupe 2022.
I hadn't driven that because I've
And you'd
missed out. That,
You'd
yeah.
taken a ride in a helicopter, hadn't you?
Oh,
With blue lights on it. And but the updates to this car, it's more than a midlife facelift. With new engine mounts, new suspension components, and they did a lot of work. It was, and you feel for the people who bought an early coupe because they can only have the engine upgrade. They can't have the hardware changes. But it just brought the Artura up a level, didn't it? From where it was in 22, it made it more of a more precise, almost like not quite an LT, but it had that kind of attention to detail feel to it, and the work they've done to it.
I sort of struggle with McLarens. I love certain aspects of them, the steering and the damping and gear shift and the actual rocker shifter and the steer, like the feel of just the things you touch, not just the feel you get through the car. All of those things they do brilliantly, but I really don't like the engines. I can't. It's super quick, but it only actually made any kind of noise that you'd savour in the last 1500
Yeah, it was
RPM.
a weird powertrain, wasn't it? Because
which-
that last bit was
it's like
really
a totally
eye-popping.
different car,
Yeah.
like a hot, angry kind of exciting noise, but you're up in that area. So
Is that the
little.
motorsport DNA McLaren doing that? Of you're always driving it
I
flat
don't
out.
know. I think it's maybe the nature of the way they have to do the powertrains to comply with all the current emissions
Regulations,
and
yeah.
efficiency drive. They sort of have to live in this realm where they don't really express that side of themselves.
And the other weird thing about the powertrain is that actually having the hybrid in there was really good, because you had this, it's almost like the gap in the middle was the bit that wasn't
Yeah.
great, because having that initial electric boost overcame what we've sort of said about McLarens in the past, that they have got a bit of lag.
Well, they can
now
put,
you have
they
so
can
you've
put
got,
big turbos on stuff
so-
to give you the peak power
Yeah.
and fill in the lag with a hybrid now,
Yeah.
can't they? But that
you've
just
got that.
it's quite hard to have anything other than this big slab of propulsion, and then you get the exciting bit once you're already going too fast to. It's not specific to the McLaren. It's
No, that's a
symptom of
modern
all
thing,
those
isn't it?
cars, but
It's still you don't have to be driving it at its peak to.
you can appreciate
So
all the other things.
yeah,
The way it
the-
steers and the way it rides and the way it stops and the uniformity of all the controls and stuff. It's a really
Seating positions.
driving position's great.
they've sort of fast tracked themselves to in a very different way, but the same point with the MX-5 where they can just keep honing things. They've got the base car so well nailed down now. It really feels like a car built for people like us. If only you could rewind 5 or 10 years and put a more exciting, less silenced engine in it, you'd have something that was easily the equal of the equivalent Ferrari.
Yeah, be interesting when we put that against a 296 to see, because they were tied in 22. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any clear water.
Come
now
on, the
between
Ferrari
them.
engine in the McLaren, and you'd have the car really.
Yeah,
I think
there's an engine swap for Lipto
Yeah,
to have a
yeah,
go at.
exactly.
Where should we go from our... Do you want to stay in the UK and go to our...
Should we go to where we thought we were going in the conversation with the Morgan?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, the Morgan Plus 4. We first had this sort of generation of Morgans in 2019 in Spain, didn't we? The Plus 6, which was...
Yeah, bloody hell.
great for burnouts and not much else.
Yeah, it's a very hairy thing, that, wasn't it? But
And then we had a Plus 4 in, I think it was 21. Yeah, this year was the updated Plus 4 again, which is, this car had the handling pack on it. It was nitrogen dampers and some other adjustments to it. And it was... They're great characterful cars, aren't they, those Plus 4s? And they've moved on so much from what people probably consider them from being the same car for so long.
yeah,
It's got that BMW engine, which seems to suit it quite well.
it's a really impressive thing. It's much quicker than, I think it would be a shock to most people how bloody fast it is.
It was a shock to me. It went pootling out of the car park with a little MGB sound to it, and then ripped its tyres to shreds as I put my throttle on the throttle.
But again, it's 1,000 kilos or something, isn't it? With a lot of power and a lot of torque.
Quite a strong turbo effect.
It's limited by the tyres, isn't it? I think if you had so I think this Plus 6 has 17s on it, and this has 15s,
Yeah.
which are really cute, dinky
It's
little
great.
cotton reel things, aren't they?
And,
Which look beautiful, but you're very restricted on the
Yeah, so
tyre.
you're stuck with an Avon.
With a lot of squirm going on.
Yeah, there's
Sort
a
of an
lot of
interesting
things
kind of
going on under the car. Turn the wheel, and then there's
That's
all sorts of
pretty
other
much
things
what goes on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lose control.
Yeah, elbows out, isn't it?
But it was one of those cars where it's a lovely. Every journey you did in it was an event and felt lovely, and you could sort of. I thought afterwards, it's one of those cars you could actually, if you had it in your garage, you'd probably use it an awful lot, almost every day, because it would make every journey fun and interesting. But weirdly, it wouldn't necessarily be the one you'd take out just to drive on a Sunday morning. Do you know what I mean? It's that sort of...
It made me smile every time I drove
Yeah.
it, and every time I saw it, it's like, oh, that looks so good.
Yeah, because it's beautifully made as well.
Yeah, really nicely made. Like totally, it hides a lot of what it is because it looks so familiar to, as four-wheeled Morgans always have, but it's nothing like them underneath. But it's still quite an odd thing to drive, isn't it? It doesn't behave like a modern.
I don't think it's
car.
getting the best out of the nitron dampers. They have improved it.
I'd love to
They've
put some
made it
better
more-
tyres on it. I think it would transform
Yeah,
the way it seems to go into a corner.
because it like you say, it's 1,000 kilos, so it should be terrifically agile and
It's got that proper
exploitable.
chassis under it now.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, it's proper bonded
Yeah.
aluminium.
Yeah, it feels structurally sort of sound and stiff, doesn't it? So it does have that adjustability, but as you point, it's not getting the best out of some of the components it's got.
No, the tyres are definitely the weakest link, aren't they? And they're probably the most important.
And there's a few quirks, isn't there?
But I love the way it sounds. It sounds brilliant, doesn't
amazing.
it? It sounds brilliant. It's got more performance than you need, but you can actually dig into enough of it that you don't feel you're missing out on anything.
It'd be nice to have somewhere to put your left foot.
Yeah, I had to sort of stretch that out under the clutch pedal on the motorway.
Sort of either put your knee around your nose or stick it under the
tuck your
clutch.
foot under the clutch pedal.
Yeah.
It's throwback ergonomics. That is.
But yeah, I'm very glad it was there, and it wasn't. Again, it wasn't like a.
Yeah,
It's kind of, we've set it up for a bit of a kicking. It was never going to be a conventional choice, was it? But it.
yeah, that's the thing I
justified.
took from it, was it didn't feel out of its depth. I worried it might feel like a fish out of water, but it definitely felt, up to par and a proper performance car as opposed to a novelty act.
And I think if you've been on the merry-go-round of buying Caymans or Boxsters or BMWs or whatever it is, and you finally want to step off that and maybe have a car, because you could buy one of these and keep it
It's like
forever,
It's like a
because it's
Caterham,
not
isn't it? You
really
only ever
gonna
need to
date.
buy one because it's
Yeah.
not going to date, and you're not going to use it, and
you won't
all the time.
get anything like that experience in anything else. So I think it's a really refreshing, unique car, I think, which is very unusual to be able to have the opportunity to buy something like that that's engineered as well as that, with the kind of powertrain quality that car's got. It's a really lovely
And
thing.
it was my turn to watch something hilarious in the mirror. Because you were coming down off the mountain. I think I was in the Yaris, and I was going to fiddle with the modes, but I only just distracted by what you were doing behind in the Morgan. So what's it? You could actually hear the tyres squealing at times.
Yeah, you could smell the tyres in them with the roof and doors off. Yeah, they're working.
You just see it appearing in the mirror at different angles. You know.
Yeah, no, it's a
really
fun
good.
thing. Really, really fun car.
Yeah, and it didn't feel out of its step, did it? No, what it's not. It wasn't. Sometimes you'll have a car that you think, oh, I've been left with this, and I've got to do the 90-minute schlep back.
I mean, it's a lot of money though, isn't it? It's like 80 grand or something.
Yeah.
That car in
I
that
think
spec,
it's
which
70 something before options.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it's bespoke.
which
It's-
caught my breath a little bit. But
You would need the handling pack as well.
Yeah,
You'd
yeah.
need the nitrons and the limited slip diff, which is another option on top of that as well.
Yeah,
So
it's sort of that's the world we are, isn't it? You these stuff with low volume stuff is
But
going
it's
to
a
be
hand-built,
expensive. Exactly.
hand-built low-volume sports car that you can have pretty much built to your spec, isn't it? So it's
Yeah, it was great to have it there and
I think it
great
was-
fun throughout the week, wasn't
I
it?
think it was still the third cheapest car in the test, I think, which is...
we like to keep it real.
Keeping it real.
Yeah, but what's the
Or
lease?
fourth,
What's
sorry,
the lease value? That's what everybody wants to know.
Yeah, where should we go from Morgan's?
Mustang.
Go on then. Ford Mustang Dark Horse. James, you put this forward because you're the only one who'd driven it.
Yeah, well, and Yusuf drove it on the Route Napoleon
Okay.
in summer, so we can...
He's not
No, that's true.
Yeah, it's not Yusuf. Why do you think you're here, James?
Leave
You
after
can't
this
call
bit.
witnesses.
Yeah.
I put it to you.
Yeah, this is a kangaroo court.
Well, I've lost my thread of thought now. But it was,
I'll be James's defence attorney. In James's defence, we had a different car, didn't we? Because you'd driven the 6-speed manual and we got a 10-speed auto, which was our bad because we should have known, but the car was supplied by Ford Spain.
Ford UK couldn't supply us with their press car. I think frustratingly, their Dark Horse arrived as we got back. So they very kindly sort of spoke to their colleagues in Spain and supplied us with a car. But yeah, it was the 10-speed auto, or it could have been a 100-speed auto.
Yeah, it's
that's
like
the problem, isn't it? The
Gearbox
only
from a
thing,
mountain bike or
Yeah.
something. Wasn't it? It was hopeless.
most people have a ZF that seemed to have a Shimano gearbox in it.
Yeah, no, it totally ruined the car, didn't
It
it?
just dominated the car, didn't it? But you just constantly couldn't. It was part of everything you were trying to do. You just couldn't get away from its shortcomings. It never.
Yeah, it felt like sort of it made such an impact on the first drive that it was quite hard to sort of see past it. And it was only the sort of the second and the third, once you knew what was coming and you could sort of park that bit of the car and ignore it, then you saw all the good stuff, which is obviously the reason you said it should be there, is absolutely right, because the chassis underneath it, the way it was
great.
balanced and really kind of was really, really nice.
The way it handles and
But-
the brakes are really good, and it feels more like a European or a car built to European tastes than Mustangs that I've driven in the past have. I did have a really good drive, but I think it was the first morning. So yeah, I really enjoyed it on that particular road because I think I could, stay somewhere between 6th and 8th or 4th and 7th or something, the intermediate gears. But and it just seemed to suit that road and work much better than I thought it would. It feels small when you'd expect it to feel big. And the engine was sort of in a sweet spot, but on the roads where you could really open it up,
It
it
felt
seemed to take
slow,
the edge
didn't
off,
it?
whether
Yeah.
it's torque limited because of the gearbox, or it just never felt like it had. And I know it's 50 horsepower down on the American car that you drove as well, because we have to have stupid European emission regs, so that strangles it a bit. But it felt like if it had a 6-speed manual,
Yeah, I think it would
it
have.
would have transformed that car. I
Yeah,
think.
it's such a big part of the character of how you interact with the car, but also, like you say, the way you access the engine and what the engine does, because it's...
On the track, it was hilarious. You was just like, and it was doing about 70.
And then you exit the pit lane.
Yeah,
Had the Fast and Furious
yeah,
gearbox.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Vin Diesel spec.
It was it was because, as you said, the more you drove it, and you did you were able to recalibrate round the gearbox yourself, and there was some, in some respects, it was better than the M4 because it felt more resolved and it knew what it wanted to do and wanted to be, and you felt more comfortable with it. Had very good sort of body control, and it didn't have that.
Its
sort of
sweet
pitch
spot
and
would
roll.
have been much broader than the BMW, I think.
Well, it did seem to you say it was torque limited, certainly in the low gears, you couldn't get it to do anything,
No.
which is very
even with
un-Mustang.
stuff switched off.
Yeah,
which is,
apparently switched off.
in the wet as well. Which, bizarre.
Yeah, which is absurd because that's it's usually early fun.
I know we're not judging a car on its interior ergonomics, but the interior was way worse than I remember it being.
Put that down to the jet lag.
Yeah.
It had that on handbrake as well, didn't it?
Yeah,
which is
the
kind of
e-brake, which...
So it gives you a fly-off handbrake for initiating turns, maybe, but then you can't
On the track.
bring the power up
Oh, to keep it
going.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very, very peculiar package in some respects.
Hats off to them for sort of keeping a manual handbrake of sorts, though, and trying to do that, because I think a lot of Mustangs get used in auto tests and things in the States.
Well, talking of handbrakes, GR Yaris.
That was
I
good.
thought you were going to handbrake us into the interval.
Nah, I thought about it, but having seen the pictures of what was going on with the Yaris, I mean, that's obviously another update of a car that we enjoy and champion and can't get enough of. And again, it did those GR Yaris things of entertaining and making every drive enjoyable, but didn't seem to have the sort of rabid enthusiasm it did first time. Some of us sort of gelled with it straight away, others took longer, and some sort of it did that thing of first hit was really high and then it sort of
I think
petered out a bit.
it's road dependent and certainly weather dependent. I think everyone that drove it, we had that really wet day. I wished I'd driven it then, because when I did drive it was up in the mountains in the dry. I sort of felt like I'd gone a bit cold on it, really. It seemed to make heavy weather of the inclines, because the engine doesn't sound particularly good, and it's got that sort of slightly leaden, it's got a bit of zip initially, and then it still runs out of enthusiasm.
Yeah, strangely, it didn't feel quite as punchy as the first generation, but everything else for me was better in terms of just I felt like I had much more on the front end, trusted the front end more in this second gen, obviously seating position, which, because I'm unnecessarily tall, wasn't great for me in the first car, but sort of, I loved it. It felt like it was eating its tyres alive when you pushed it kind of on the first. It wasn't.
Really
but
scrubby.
It sort of left me a bit conflicted, really, because I love it. Well, like whenever I see one on the road, it's like, it's GR Yaris. But when I was in it, I thought, I was waiting for it to find the right road, and I tried it on a few different types of road, and it still didn't really do it for me this time.
I think exactly as you said, it's road dependent and weather dependent, because I drove that exact same car in the UK before the test in
Yes,
the
of course.
Peak District, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant.
And it was terrible weather, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was a bit of
wet and
both.
cold
It was really changeable throughout that whole shoot. And then I had exactly the same experience as you in the mountains in the Pyrenees. I took it to a road, I thought, this would be perfect for the Yaris, full of hairpins, it's like a little rally stage. Yeah. And I don't know, I just felt like I was chasing understeer and stuck in the sort of turbo lag zone, and it felt a bit lethargic, and I felt a bit disappointed. And then Stu and I both drove it the morning of the day when it just wouldn't stop raining.
Yeah, I mean, you very bravely got in the passenger seat of me driving in the rain. But yeah, that seemed to be its brilliant environment, because it was a tighter road, it was absolutely sheeting it down, and it just worked, didn't it? But as on those bigger roads, as you sort of always felt waiting for something to. It's
hard for the suspension to shine on those bigger roads as well, because it's so good, isn't it? Where it keeps control of itself, and you can just chuck it around because it's got control. I think it was,
And it was one of those cars you need to just play with the mode. You needed to get into track mode just to give it more turn.
Understeering.
Give it more turn. Yeah, I drove it as a prototype on a circuit, which you would think is the last place you'd want to take a Yaris, being a short wheelbase thing. And it was phenomenal around there. On a long corner where you keep the throttle in, it actually just goes into a little bit of oversteer at the very end, which is perfect. But yeah, on those roads, in the wet it was great, as expected. But yeah, I liked it. But yeah, the mode buttons. Should we talk about something else with mode buttons?
Well, the BMW's got plenty of them, hasn't it?
I'm familiar.
Or should we save that for after the break?
Shall we have a break? And we've got 2 more cars to go through, and then we'll also talk about our time at Navara, and then we'll run through some scores, shall we? So go and have some ginger nuts, and we will see you see you after the break. Welcome back to part 2 of eCoty 2024 podcast. We're just running through the cars, so we've got 3 left to talk about, and James touched on it before the break. M4CS, which, driver modes, that seemed to be what everyone sort of got out of it. And, well, once they'd sort of injured themselves getting into it, because it had the McDonald's fries holder in its cup seats. But straight another CS that, it's 4 years on the trot we've had a CS on car of the year, and M3 last year. And what do we think of the 4? Did it move the game on? Was it different enough? You did a lot of pre-launch stuff with it, John, didn't you? On
I think
track.
One of the things I didn't realise, because we only drove it for 5 laps of Salzburgring, and it was on Cup 2Rs. I didn't realise it was going to come on Cup 2Rs as the standard tyre in October.
In the mountains.
They were insistent on it though, because when we had the 3 CS, it wasn't on them because we requested it's towards the end of the year. It's probably going to be wet and it'll be cold enough that they'll be like concrete.
And it was a road bias test. It was road only, wasn't it? The year we had, because we had track element, they wanted it to have the Rs.
And when we'd been out to M to see all the big wigs, hadn't we, and driven some M3 touring and stuff a year or so ago, and they were very insistent that it's a different car on Cup 2Rs, and I drove one on.
You drove a CSL, didn't you? On
I
Cup
drove
2?
and it is, but it's such a specific tyre, isn't it?
I quite like the tyres. Weirdly, it's that fun thing of kind of, I know they don't, but there's something quite fun about that element of them being cold and then warming up and feeling the car change underneath it. I'm not saying it's kind of a reason to like it, but there's
is high, isn't it?
It's
when
kind
it's
of
cold and wet.
Absolutely. I
with
did
all
quite
that
enjoy
talk.
that change in feel of the car. It's quite sort of quite fun, isn't it?
You're in a focused car, aren't you, when it's on tyres that are that focused?
It'd be chuffing scary if you didn't realise what you were getting into.
I think that engine, that powertrain with all that torque and cold, lightly treaded tyres, you can think you're safe in quite a high gear, and it still builds boost quite quickly. So, but when it's on it, and the temperature's right, and the tyres are switched on, and it is like this is the magic in there. This is the good stuff. Yeah. But it falls out of that window, to use a Formula One term. But it is like that, isn't it? You kind of understand why Formula One drive. The car's terrible. The tyres are not right. It's that extreme. But the car doesn't. The rest of the car doesn't feel that extreme to me. It's like
no, and it's the contrast with the Mustang is that the Mustang seemed to cope with 90% of the roads. Caught out by 10% maybe. Yeah. Was the M4CS. It was only good on sort of 10% of the roads, and the rest of the time it felt compromised and not comfortable or settled, which is why you went hunting through the modes.
Continually faffing around with all the different modes, aren't you?
Dampers, steering, braking. Even you can change the braking.
Although I would say the 10% at the time when it does feel just right is pretty mind blowing. Yeah. It's
as you see, on those warmer days, when you just got it just right, wasn't it? It was, you felt it was almost, not unbeatable, but it was one of those cars of, I just don't want this drive to end.
The first drive I had in it was on one of the faster, more flowing sections of the mountain, and it was blazing sunshine, so the tarmac was really warm, the tyres came in really quickly, and I think if we'd stopped the voting then and there, I'd have had it right near the top of my list, because it was amazing.
I got out of it every time going, wow, that's really impressive. But it's one of those cars that, if I didn't go back and drive it again,
you could drive it in the afternoon and think, I really don't get this car, because it's just like like driving a different
I did car. Exactly that. I drove it on the other side of the mountain in the shade on a tighter, twistier bit, and it wasn't anywhere near as much fun.
I think if it felt like you were in a GT3 RS type car that was going to be amazing on a track, and everything would come together, and all the sacrifice and compromise was for that, I'd get it, but it still feels like a big, heavy, it's sort of unsuited to the purpose they're trying to, it's a square peg in a round hole, really.
Yeah, I think it was the only car with electric seats.
Yeah.
which is crazy, isn't it?
But they deleted all the places to put stuff in the interior, so I had to keep pulling over to fish my phone, radio, bottles of water from the footwell, because they were flying all over the place.
Everything finds its way to just behind the brake pedal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite a confused car.
Yeah, exactly. It felt very confused, not forgettable, but not memorable in any way.
I don't know not who buys them, but I don't know where I'll see one. It's not like probably you'd see if you're at the Nürburgring or something, but I don't know that. I don't know what you buy it for or own it for really, because it doesn't have the bandwidth of a regular.
No, I
M3
think
or
about an
M4.
M3 Touring, kind of, and driving that and
Yeah.
loving it and thinking I don't know what this added over that sort of.
Well, you ran an M4 Comp X-Drive. Both of you did. Do you see the difference that a CS adds, or would you think actually just?
Not really. No. There's little bits you can see. You can see some of the CS stuff in there, but not enough to justify.
You'd
I
have
think
to
probably
literally
the kind
drive
of-
them back to back,
Yeah.
wouldn't you?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
then
exactly. It's only
then
because I
you
spent
would
a long
notice,
time in-
but with a bit of time gone by, I think the regular car's probably more satisfying, more memorable than
and
the
it
CS.
works on 90% of the time because it's really good in loads of different situations. So
We're talking of cars that had I think it had the least, aside from the MX-5 and the Morgan, the least driver modes, which was the 911 ST. After last year's GT3 RS, where you could adjust everything, there was barely anything you can adjust. But which in today's world on a 911 is quite unheard of, really, isn't it? And
Yeah,
on
I
the
loved it for the simplicity of it. I sort of came to it. Obviously, I'd read about the car and knew about it, but I was still a bit of a head scratcher as to what is it? Is it an expensive GT3 Touring, or is it a decontented GT3 RS? And actually, it seemed to sort of carve out this new niche that took the best bits of all of them, but you didn't really miss any of the other bits of those cars. It seemed like very much its own thing, but strangely old school because it doesn't have loads of
it's very old school.
shit to adjust, does it?
There were times when you were looking to adjust something. Oh, I can't adjust it. This is it.
I think it's got dampers, doesn't it? But sort of two modes for the dampers.
Yeah, and exhaust, and that's
and
about
throttle
it.
blip, which is the one thing I found was I kind of found myself wanting to turn it on, which was because there was something strange for me about the way the reaction at the top of the throttle pedal, which when you weren't going for it sort of absolutely, it just seemed to be quite hard to heel and toe,
really
sort of,
difficult.
which was, and that was something that just knocked it back for me. But
compared with the
otherwise,
MX-5, which is the easiest car in the world to heel and toe
exactly,
in,
which is strange. But the engine in that G3, wow, I mean, or ST rather, is
From whether you're behind the wheel driving it or stood at the top of the mountain waiting for it to rock up, you could just hear it for miles. Just get lost in the sound, don't you?
That's an awesome powertrain, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was on Cup 2s, wasn't it? That car, which
not
as
ours,
they've evolved, those Cup 2s have just become more and more usable because we had one wet day in the middle of the week, didn't we? And the M4 wasn't sort of parked up and ignored, but there was more trepidation of getting in it and driving that. Whereas the ST on those Cup 2s, they've just honed them so it works.
Still wasn't overburdened with grip.
No, it was a bit edgy. It dealt with standing water better.
MX-5 and McLaren were the two cars I felt in the wet drove pretty much exactly the same as they did in the dry.
But you can just
but you know exactly where you are with a 911, so it's kind of
Yeah, I'd sort of agree with Henry. I did find the heel and toe and matching the revs was pretty tricky. That's usually one of the joys of a 911 manual, is that it makes you feel really, competent
really
and slick
normally,
and finessing. And all
So is that just the clutch and the flywheel
Yeah, I think it
on
is.
that car compared to a regular?
Because
I think
normal
so.
manual ones are, they're really sweet to change gear in, aren't they? But I think because this one's got such a tiny flywheel, the revs flick up really quickly, but they also die really quickly. So if you're not fast at changing gear, the engine's sort of idling when you...
Or you have to be very precise with the throttle.
Yeah, which was really tricky because...
That's where you guys fell down though, wasn't it?
Yeah, just not talented enough to drive it.
I love the response. I think that's what surprised me is how much
the laughter.
how much more responsive the engine felt in something that's already like a benchmark. I think you appreciated what the 992 RS brings to then experience that in in a manual, it somehow, with 6 speeds, you sort of get more opportunity to enjoy it, I think, or appreciate it.
It's very similar to the McLaren as well, though, wasn't it? That you had to kind of push yourself to rev it all the way out.
They've always been a bit like that, haven't they? You get to 8 and think, do I really need to go to 9?
Yeah.
But you're already having a brilliant time from 3 to 8, aren't you? So
it's got the shorter ratios in it, which definitely was a nice thing.
But you sort of, I don't want to miss out, so you want to rev it, but you feel guilty, like, what if anyone's watching or listening to this? It's a phenomenal power.
No, it's an interesting car, isn't it? It's fascinating how something you think you're going to know so well is actually quite different to what you would have predicted.
Just a shame it came covered in stickers.
It was a horrendous spec.
Yeah, the inside was fine. I thought it was just the outside with the stickers. I don't know what they're trying to achieve with.
To be cool.
The puddle lighting, I think, was the.
Icons of cool. Was it icons of cool or something?
It's clearly made an impression.
Oh my god!
If you have to say it out loud, then it's
I'd
not
have
cool.
to put a little bit of sticky tape over the thing that beams
puddle
that
light.
down.
I think if I read the spec sheet properly, that was a £14,000 option to have those stickers and the puddle lights.
So they would.
They take £14,000 off the price of the car.
They'll probably take off the value of it, probably, yeah.
But they were peeling off. They're just vinyl.
That might be me.
I might have misread it. But I'm pretty sure that's.
Well, that wasn't the only car with stickers.
Good point.
No,
The Morgan had stickers.
The Morgan had a roundel. Yeah,
the
and
Audi
there was
had
another.
wow, the Audi,
Yeah.
It's like Walter
Sid.
Rell's wardrobe from 1984, wasn't it? Amazing.
Perfect example of never judging a car by its sticker set, though, wasn't
But
it?
we will love that car in like 20 years' time when there's some tedious cars and coffee meeting. We'll say, oh, look, there's someone bought one with all the stickers on it. Because you see the grey one and the black one, and it's like, oh, it's a bit of a cop-out, even though you'd have to be pretty bold to style out the white with red and black logos. But
And with the white wheels, which makes the wheels look enormous.
yeah, I love that. I do love it. It's a proper cartoon.
It would just
car,
look cool
but-
because the white wheels were permanently covered in brake dust. That's because it permanently had to keep stopping for fuel.
It went through 4 tanks on the first day.
So the drive from Madrid to our location, sort of on the Pyrenees, was, and then one run of photography and filming. That was 4 tanks of fuel. But I think everyone enjoyed
I think
every single litre it drank. It was,
Yeah.
as I said, it was that car at the beginning of the test. You think, the photographers are going to commandeer that, and they're going to want to be in it, and we're not going to really complain because once you've driven it once, you have driven that. But everyone just wanted to get back in it.
It's a hell of a car.
There's always that unexpected element you don't expect, like the M5 CS. But every time you drove it, you just reminded, and there was something else that just came to light. You went, blimey, it does this as well. Oh, and it does that. It was
Just the way it turned in and then had that mid-corner kind of, it's like it's there, it's waiting for you. It's kind of, you've got those options suddenly. It was so much fun.
Ironically, for what was the biggest and heaviest car in the test, it was maybe the best around hairpins because the 4-wheel steer was so good.
It was just
And the traction, of course.
Yeah.
You could be on the throttle sort of just before you got to the apex.
Yeah.
And it would just zap out the corners.
because you drove it that morning following Henry in the ST up the hairpin road, and I was behind you in the Vantage, and it was just to watch the contrast of you sort of drifting and sliding.
Rear
out of
traction,
hairpins.
sitting down on its rear wheels. The RS6 would just hook up really well. In fact, it wanted to be in first on the hairpin, but it went better in second because you could get on the throttle earlier. It was very smooth. You could do first to second really quick, but I was gaining tenths on you going.
not that you were counting, obviously.
No.
And then on the circuit, kind of, because I did the photography stuff on that, and on the sort of you and the Morgan behind, weren't you?
Yeah.
And I had the sort of the hairpin there.
It looked great.
And you could absolutely, in second gear, just light it up with the most amazing sort of 4-wheel drive oversteer. And because it's so long, you basically felt like you had the rear wheels on the sort of the green bit beyond the curbs, nothing on the curbs, and then the front wheels on the circuit. So you could just sort of, it was.
But it's another car that they've made all. It's like, we're not going to get the chance to do any more to this car. So we want to do this. We wanted to do that, but we didn't have time with the RS6 Plus or whatever it would have been. So all the good stuff came out, and you can. That's what makes that difference, isn't it? They all add up, and it just starts to do things that the previous cars just couldn't do. I felt slightly frustrated because I knew how good it is in the UK, and it's really good. It's like it's got the same kind of feel as the old Imprezas and Evos used to have. Like, you want to find a really challenging road because it works on them so well, and we didn't have any of those kind of
there was nothing
surfaces
extreme,
in
was
Spain.
there? Nothing
so
extreme.
I sort of felt like I was missing out on that, because it really would have shone even more brightly, I think. But yeah, it's a very unexpected car. I think to be that out of place amongst all the others and yet do so well, be so memorable.
As you say, I think the years to come, it will be the one that everyone wants at a scramble or a cars and coffee. Is the
one in the Sergio Tacchini tracksuit.
Yes. I think you'd have to wait a while, wouldn't you, before it came back into being cool. Possibly. Henry, you mentioned it on track. We spent a day at Navarra at MSV's latest venture, which is a great facility. It's had obviously the MSV touch of being incredibly well presented, and they've done a lot of circuit work to extend the circuit. I think 600 metres, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were just finishing it off, weren't they? They'd added an extra sort of horseshoe section and changed some of the... Jonathan Palmer's always... He sort of looks at a particular section, doesn't he? His racer's brain kicks in and he thinks, that'd be more challenging or that'd be more fun. So
and he's done good changes as well.
Yeah, just a bit more flow in the right
a bit more challenge as well.
I've not driven there before either, so it's always nice to sort of tick off another place you've driven.
Were there any of the cars on track that we don't put much weighting, if any, on our scoring, but are there any cars that either surprised you with their track performance or either positively or negatively that you thought would be better or good?
MX-5 was brilliant. It was just as much fun, and you'd think it would feel a bit swamped, wouldn't you, and a bit gutless, and it just seemed to, I don't know, it just shows you,
even at higher speeds, it's just as balanced and poised.
Yeah.
You just third gear, throw it in, sort it out, carry on, and do it again. It's remarkable, really.
That was good fun. What else do I... Oh, how was the BMW, James? I think you found the four-wheel drive useful at one point.
You're on very thin ice.
The glass house,
almost like sort of
pretty good.
Yeah,
right.
Almost teetering on the edge.
Yeah, bit of Italian job there.
Bit of a glass house over there.
Hang on, lads, I've got an idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, how was the...
I don't know if it's been mentioned, but the BMW has switchable four-wheel drive, so you can put it in rear-wheel drive mode and switch everything off. And for photography, that's very good for making the car go sideways. It was making less tyre smoke than is ideal for photography, so I thought I'd started a bit earlier in the corner with a bit more.
I think I might have egged you on.
After some coaching from
or encouragement from
my honourable friend to my left.
Yeah. And then I discovered the four-wheel drive switchable system is very good for then getting you out of the
freshly graded, quite soft soil on the infield. It was good fun on the track though, actually, wasn't it?
Well, that's why I think they were keen for it to. They were very keen for it to be in the test, because we had a track element, and that's why it came on the Cup 2Rs, and it did come to life a bit more. It made a bit more sense, but you always think, well, it's a big, heavy. If you were to start with a track car, you wouldn't start with a 1,700 kilo.
Yeah, it's good fun when you're driving for photography, but that's not how you maybe do that for a lap on a track day and then get slung off, wouldn't you? So it's. Yeah, I don't know. It for all the good bits it shows, it sort of highlights all the fundamental weight issues, doesn't it, and size issues. And
although when you do have it in four-wheel drive sport, which sort of puts most of the torque to the rear wheels, and then you've got the multi-stage traction control, it is really good in the way it puts its power down.
Yeah, the modes, that's when they come into their own, isn't it? That they give you that adjustability. But to Dickie's point, you're not going to drive it like that on a track day, because you're just going to get a black flag the first time you come past.
And you're really tired in 5 minutes, weren't you? So
it was pretty phenomenal at Salzburg Ring. Very tidy, very grippy, very confident car.
And it feels lighter than it really is, because it's not a lightweight car, but it feels much more nimble than you'd expect.
Yeah, I mean, that's a proper challenging circuit, and it was hooked up and very precise.
Obviously, Porsche says that the 911 ST is absolutely not a track
Not a
car.
track
It's
car.
not a track car. It's a road car. It's absolutely, but it's brilliant on track.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, same as the GT3 RS.
It's not really a
12 months.
surprise, but it's kind of. But they tell
Yeah.
you.
Well, that's what they said about the RS. It's not a road car. We don't really think it should go in car of the year, and the ST is I think that was.
What do they know? Eh?
Yeah. But yeah, that was phenomenal, wasn't it? But then you'd expect it to, because the bits that they've used to build it are from probably one of the very best cars they built of a generation. It was, to whether you were driving it on track or watching it go round a circuit, it was spectacular.
They're just fundamentally good on track, aren't they? Somehow the weight distribution is not as wayward as it would have been 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's hardly
But
an issue.
It just works very well, particularly on a few sections around that lap. The brakes are great, and you never wear the brakes out or overstress those. So a lot of the Navara's got quite a lot of tight corners, hasn't it? Or little, quite long straights into quite tight corners, which would make it great for racing, but quite hard on the car from a track day point of view. But yeah, the ST always felt fab.
And you really felt the benefit of the light flywheel and the light clutch on track more than you do on the road in some ways.
Yeah, because you're always at maximum revs, aren't you, when you shift gears?
Yeah.
And the McLaren as well, obviously that was its opportunity to really whack you in the face with its performance. That was particularly down that long start-finish straight. It's got quite a long straight there, hasn't it, Navara?
Into a really disconcertingly fast kink, which is then into quite a tight corner, isn't it, like Portimao? So, super, super fast, but still strangely not uneventful, but it's...
Didn't look uneventful
it's not.
from the MX-5.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't, as you can probably tell, I didn't warm to the Artura really, and I can't imagine driving wouldn't take one on a track. No, I don't think.
I did the launch a couple of years ago at Ascari, and I really enjoyed the original car on track. I thought it was quite good, but
I think when we've had them on track before, when we've I think from the launch, and then we've had them. I had one at Anglesey. I think we have, but I haven't put lap time on it yet, and that's where the systems and everything comes together. But it seems to be its performance is a bit of a dominating factor. You end up sort of chasing its performance all the time, rather than sort of trying to sort of string a lap together and sort of find what the car can do. You're just, the performance is dominating. You just drive it as fast as you possibly can.
Their LT models are always, although they're not fundamentally different, are they? They just have a bit more edge. They just feel more inclined to. They sort of G you up a bit more than the Artura did. I think.
It's like the 750, isn't it? It's really quick round Anglesey, but it doesn't have that sort of nuance that maybe a GT3 RS has, because it is all about the performance. That's what you end up driving with.
I would say.
But yeah, they look quite spectacular for some of the filming and photography. Nearly as spectacular as the Vantage.
That's a lot of fun. And you don't have, you can hoon it around to your heart's content, but it was a good opportunity to explore the sort of variable traction control and stuff, because that's really, once you learn you can lean into it and trust it, much like the BMW or McLaren. Actually, those systems are so good now that they don't get in the way. They just define the bit where you start to lean on it, but it never really inhibits.
Because Astons normally tend to not fall over, but
they're not
historically
they've not been
great. But actually, the Vantage felt much more resolved and more together on track.
Did keep doing it because Aston and Andy were just.
You do that
obsessed.
again, because I've only got it from this angle.
and this angle.
I now need to move another 5 centimetres down the track.
They did do the photographer's thing and jump in the RS6, because I drove them around the corner with you in front, with you behind, with the drone in front. They just got all angles, so I expect that sort of 3/4 of it is their action shots.
Yeah, we only use one of them, obviously, because we only need one picture of the same car doing one thing. But yeah, it's, as you say, it went all day, and then...
and did that on the international launch as well. That car was on the international launch, and there it was doing endless laps, endless sideways shots all day. Not much time to cool down or be checked.
They do feel fit for purpose now, like a Porsche would feel as good at the end of the day as it does at the beginning of the day.
And it didn't. Yes, it got through a set of tyres, but it didn't
doesn't
absolutely
root them
rinse
either.
them,
Actually,
whereas previously they would have done, wouldn't they? They would have.
It's impressive.
Done it. But yeah, it's very. That was impressive. What was the? What do you think of the Morgan on track? Completely out of its comfort zone, but was constantly out on the circuit when it wasn't required for filming or photography. People wanted to drive it. It was kind of sort of what it was like on the road, but you had the opportunity to sort of push it that much harder. Although the tyres were still a limiting factor.
I think you push through the tyres quite quickly, and then you don't need to. On the road, you're sort of trying to feel where that limit is and maybe not stray too far beyond it. But the track, you can go straight to the limit and then work over it and you've got the space to kind of keep it over that limit. It was getting on the road. It's if you do overstep the mark, it's how you get the car back. The track was I think it weirdly, considering the tyres are not track tyres, it seemed like quite good fun to me.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good fun. Yeah. It's kind of front limited. It pushes the front more than it does the rear, but it's a pretty good communicator. You know what it's doing, and it was a fun thing. Yeah,
it looked fun. When you took it out, you were sort of always conscious of someone's going to come up in something much quicker. Don't get in their way, sort of thing. But very quickly,
does have stability control, doesn't it?
Yeah, but very quickly you felt comfortable
and ABS.
With it, didn't you? Driving it, and it just felt quite natural and fun. You just wanted to stay out and drive it.
Well, at least you know where its limits are. Most cars, you
do.
Sort of complain. Yeah, very much so. But you complain because the limits are so high in most things that you never get near them.
It's like the MX-5, isn't it? You can get on the road and certainly on the track, really enjoy it and get underneath its skin. Yeah. Yaris, you seem to spend most of your time off the ground.
You saved the tyre wear pretty well.
Yeah. Well, on the inside ones, yeah. Well, it was a bit strange because I turned everything off and went downhill, and it went to oversteer quite nice, but it wouldn't do it on the way up. And so I thought, maybe I'll just do a little bit of Scandi flick and see if it works. And it went slightly Scandi flick back slightly early and rode the inside curb and then rode the sausage curb as well, and then just stayed slightly elevated on the left-hand side, which was wasn't alarming because I thought I would be coming down any second, and then eventually
you sort of got it up to a point where you could just have driven the rest of the lap like that.
Then Aston asked if you could just do it again, but with a bit more air.
I think on the radio said, I didn't know Paul Swift was here.
Such a wag, isn't it?
A what?
A wag. But it was a moment that I wasn't expecting, but the car was okay with it. So,
again, I'd love to have a GR Yaris for a wet track day, so you sort of keep it for the winter and then terrorise people.
Be the fastest moving thing out
there. Play with the modes and
a reverse Caterham, basically.
Yeah. I think
you'd probably be adjusting the mode for each corner. What you wanted the car to do next. Yeah.
I think in the dry, it's a bit sort of within itself.
It's a little bit one-dimensional, isn't it? In the dry, I think.
Which would have been the same with an Impreza or probably Mitsubishi Evo back in the day would have been a lot of fun on track because they were much more sort of expressive, weren't they? But Impreza would be the same. You wouldn't go out of your way to drive an Impreza on track.
No. And it's interesting because the ones that turn up at our Evo track days, they've all been modified or tweaked in some way they built them for track use, so there's
wake the engine up and give it a bit more front end grip, and it would be a lot of fun, I should think.
Yeah. So the only one we did is the Mustang. You mentioned it in part one, sort of on track, just constantly changing. It just didn't get any better, did it?
Never delivered what you like. The deeper you dug, the less you found somehow, which seemed totally at odds with you'd read the spec sheet or what you'd expect of a big, powerful front engine rear drive V8 coupe, and it didn't seem to. Brakes were great, really nice pedal, firm pedal, great brake response and stamina and all the rest of it. So it sort of, and the balance of the car was good, but it just didn't seem to want to loosen up, did it at all?
Except for the one corner I ended up on doing cornering shots for Annie and Essex, because like I say, the rest of the time didn't seem to do it or wouldn't do it on the road. And yet this one corner, you just turned in, got through, and it did everything sort of, and it just went sideways, and you sort of pretty much the lock stops, and you brought it back, and you're like, why won't it do that
Everywhere.
anywhere else.
Yeah.
How have I'm quite glad I found the corner, so I don't have to sort of do this multiple times, trying to sort of do it for Aston, sort of saying, "Can you just give that another go?" Did it twice, and it was
I think
fine,
it's
but
the one car that I'd like to drive again in the right spec of all the cars we had this year. I'd love to drive a 6-speed.
Now that Ford's got them in the UK, we might be able to.
We'll get one back. Do you think it would have changed? We'll get into the voting or finishing order. Do you think it would have changed its position?
Not transform. It's not like it would propel it right to the top of the list, but I think it
it
would
might have hopped up a couple of places. I think.
had a slightly better showing. I think definitely.
Because the results this year, it was one of our. We've always had the last couple of years. It's been very close and tight. The scoring on.
Yeah, we thought last year was close, didn't
Yeah,
we? But
so it seems to. I think it's because the cars are either coming. They're either very finely tuned, sort of like the MX-5, the Artura with its updates, the RS6, aren't they? They are engineer-led cars where they are fine-tuning them, so the gap seems.
It's as good as they're going to
get,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Probably
So-
with most of them.
So the Mustang sort of took home the. Well, no, Wooden Spoon sounds unfair. It finished 9th, first loser.
It's solidly in the top 10.
But yeah, I don't think a manual would have.
It might have been 7th, but
it's
it's not going to.
It finished behind the M4 and the Morgan that were joint scoring.
It was fewer than 2 points off the M4.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
Well,
We do it on
as you say.
we do the scoring.
Yeah, we maybe explain
do the scoring,
the scoring.
out of 100, and everyone puts their votes in, and we get to an average, which is.
But we kind of have a mental. There's
Yeah.
thresholds, aren't there? If it's less than in your head, if it's less than 85, you're basically saying it's a 4-star.
Yeah, we try and tie ourselves in knots, don't we? But we've ironed them out over the last couple of years. So we obviously in the magazine when we're rating a car, it's a star rating. Very few cars are 5 stars. They have to be very special for that. So I think we've sort of mentally people have sort of 85.
You should be in the 85 and over band. So if it's anything like under 80, it's like, well, I'm being quite, you're being pretty harsh on something to score it.
Or it shouldn't have been there.
Or you've picked, or we've picked the wrong.
Yeah, and the lowest score for the Mustang was 81. So it wasn't as if it shouldn't have been there at all. Yeah. But I think as we all agreed it was had a 6-speed manual gearbox, not because we're Luddites. It's just that
had such a big impact on the way the car.
Yeah, the
behaved.
intensity just seems to sap the life out of it, doesn't it, or the potential. So so it was less than 2 points behind the M4 and the Morgan. So the Mustang was 84.2, if we're making a note, and the M4 and the Morgan were both on 86, which is a real contrast with two completely different cars.
2 BMW engine cars.
Two BMW engine cars.
I'm sure the guys at M will be like,
What are they smoking? Any sort of thoughts on those scoring? I think it's quite. No one was sort of. Hang on a minute, what's that doing down there?
no, I don't think anything got particularly hard done by, did it? I think we all overthink it massively, don't we? You're like racking your brains and oh god, am I getting this right? And they go all around the houses. I think in the end you just have to follow your own
instinct
and follow your heart really, and then it'll within those boundaries, and then it all tends to shake out with a result that pretty much everyone is happy with, I think.
Yeah. It was an interesting sort of when you're going through the results. You're like, oh, hang on a minute, a 100-odd thousand M car and nearly £100,000 Morgan, but yeah, they're complete.
Doesn't matter though, does it? I don't think the
It's-
price. None of that matters. None of the pricing or spec, or it's just how good it is, and whether you've had a great drive in it, and what you take away from them. I think.
Then there was the GR Yaris, which came in on 89 points, just missing, just behind the RS6 that was 90.4. Again, it was very close this year, so close.
I think I had those two level on my score sheet.
Let me have a look. Yes, hang on. That means me looking at numbers and talking. I can't do that.
And they're two 4-wheel drive cars that
Yeah.
do
Almost felt like the
yeah.
RS6 was a support car for the GR Yaris rally car.
Yeah.
I don't know, the RS6 was a surprise to finish so high, and maybe the Yaris for finishing where it did. But it just felt throughout the week, wasn't it, that there was more enthusiasm, more sort of people having more fun, better experiences in that.
Yeah, I
in
think
that
if we
Audi.
were all to write down our sort of predictions for finishing order before and after it, it's always those sorts of cars that will surprise you, isn't it? I think we wouldn't have expected the Audi to be ahead of the cars it is or was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that Audi was just.
I remember the first dinner, the first night, after the first day of the shoots, the topic, if you go around the table, the one sentence that kept popping up was, "That Audi's good, isn't it?"
Yeah, it's like a sort of slightly hesitant sort of, that's really good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then, and then everyone opens up a little bit because it's quite an unexpected.
Yeah.
Well, you always tend to have one of those cars on every eCoty, don't you? That you're like, should I be liking this as much as I am? And you sort of look for that reassurance, and it's kind of like a secret handshake. Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. You're right. Yeah, and then we get into the, again, really tight. So the Aston Martin Vantage was fourth, 91.6. I think everyone scored that quite similarly across the board, apart from you, Henry. It was in the 90s for everyone. But I think that just is a reflection of the car, isn't it? Of how highly regarded we all thought of it. And again, it's a car that you had a really good drive in it every time you drove it. You didn't feel you were in the wrong car for the wrong road that you were on.
It's quite a particular character, isn't it? I can see why, it's just a preference, isn't it? Whether you really like that type of delivery in that sort of package, or whether you prefer something else. But it was solidly highly rated, wasn't it, by pretty much everyone?
Yeah, it was. Again, it's one of those cars that you didn't mind which route we were about to go. If you're in the Vantage, you knew you were going to have a good drive.
I think Aston's in the pile. They tend to polarise people in voting historically, don't they? They either do seemingly disproportionately well or disproportionately badly. This one's just sort of sat just above, in the sweet spot, I think.
You wouldn't sort of feel shortchanged if that was the car that you going all the way back to the birth of performance car the year before it was called eCoty. If you had to drive a car for a year,
lived with that for a year, you'd be pretty happy, wouldn't you? I think.
Be very happy. And then we found it a couple of years recently. We have a tie for second place this year, which was, you probably worked out, the McLaren and the Mazda. And I think when the result came through, there was sort of a cheer for the MX-5, because it wasn't a novelty car. It wasn't just, oh, this is a light, small car, this is why we like it. It was,
it should have won.
There on, I mean, it's put it top, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, you voted it.
Yeah.
No, and I think if it had won, I don't think nobody would have been, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, we wouldn't have gone for a recount, would we? We would have gone, yeah, that's fair enough. It was by then, I think everyone's scores were there's such fine margins between all the scores that you only had to put it third on your list, and it would make as Will say, that the difference between them and the winning car is tiny, isn't it? The McLaren and the MX-5 obviously couldn't be split, and I think that's Mazda obviously over the moon that the MX-5, which is has been their kind of halo car, isn't it? Is finishing second on car of the year, and is it nearly 10 years old, that version? Yeah,
it's knocking on, isn't it?
Knocking on, and just that continual improvement has just made it.
Yeah, they've stuck with it, haven't they? And it's still must be one of the lightest real production cars. The Morgan is a sort of production car, but this is line built.
Global car sold everywhere.
High volume car, and it's remarkable that it's so light, and it's great that they just kept improving it.
Yeah. And for the McLaren, it's a step up from 2022, where it was joint third with the Ferrari. It's second this year, and I think that's fair.
Perhaps it should have won. I don't know.
I was going to say, John, you voted
I think it was kind of like
I did.
Second was about the right place for it, I think.
Yes, we'll go through that, and we'll go through who put what first in a minute. But that was, they were 92.6, and it was the closest finish we've had, because the winning car, which you've probably all worked out probably an hour ago,
probably a year ago,
was the 911 ST that was just 0.2 ahead of everything else.
It's so close, isn't it?
So close, and it could have gone either anyway with those top three, I think. And I think if either of those three cars had been voted the winner, we'd all have said, well, that's absolutely the right result. You could mix this top three around, couldn't you? And it was.
I think because we are genuinely so conscious of not another bloody Porsche that I think that there was like a collective inward groan, wasn't there, almost, because it's like, oh man, not because we begrudge it winning or don't feel it should deserve to be up there, but it's so close with the votes now. It can only we can either have a tie or be 0.1%. That's the only way we could ever have a closer result, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's so close actually when you look at the kind of the scores from the Yaris, which is on 89, all the way up to the Porsche 92.8. I mean, that is a stacked.
Yeah, it's like Formula One, isn't it? When you look at qualifying and there's 0.03 of a second between first and fifth or something.
Yeah, which is probably one of the drivers blinking. It's getting so tight.
I think.
So what we're saying, the Reader's the winner here.
Yeah, Reader's always the winner, Henry. I mean,
So so you put the MX-5 first.
So Henry was the MX-5.
McLaren first.
John was MX-5. I put the Vantage first.
John was McLaren.
I had the Vantage first, and
James and I were correct.
James and you got the envelopes.
Yeah.
But that I think it's important to say. It is important to say that, because outwardly it's like, oh, a bloody Evo unanimously. They've picked the Porsche, but actually
we haven't.
We didn't, and it's we don't ever confer with our voting, and it does come down to fractions of a point. Doesn't
none
it?
of us knew what the other person was going to say when we all sat around the table.
And I think at the beginning of the week as well, it was when you knew the cars. Obviously, the photographers are always, should I just photograph the 911 now because it's won? But we're always like, well, we've all driven all the other cars. There's a reason they're all here. And the last 2, 3, maybe 4 years has shown just how close the best of the best are getting.
I did. There was quite a funny moment with Aston and I hadn't driven the 911. I think I probably went through the first day and a bit, or maybe, I don't know, it may have been longer than that before I sat in the ST and took it for a drive, and Aston said, I'll jump in and need to get a driving shot of you. And I got in it, started it up. I got about 100 yards down the road, and I went, oh, fuck. And he looked at me and started laughing. But I think, I don't know, cars click with you sometimes, don't they? And you can't fake that feeling that you get. And obviously, if it hadn't been the correct instinct, then the more I drove it, the less I'd have liked it.
And that's the thing, we all have our preferences of the way a car is. So yeah, you are going to get the spread, and it does have to be an overall view, doesn't it, at the end of the day?
I just for me, it's hard to resist that engine with a manual gearbox positioned where that engine is, so it does all the things they do. And I love the fact that it's like that. I started off thinking it was a decontented RS, and then I came away from it thinking it's the absolute kind of crystallization of what those GT department cars are, because it's more compromised than the RS because it hasn't got all the configurability, and it does demand slightly more from you as a driver, and you have to get in the headspace where you accept what it does over certain bits of road because you can't change it. But I found that so liberating because I'm not the opposite. I think it's probably why I took a dislike to the BMW, because I was constantly maybe I should be in Sport Plus or Sport, or this should be in Comfort, or and even when it was right, you knew, I'm just going the next stretch of road I'm going to need to fiddle around with it again. If that's all taken away from you,
it's a similar thing for me with the MX-5.
With the MX-5, it's the same thing.
Absolutely, sort of, you just got in it.
They engage the same part of your brain, I think. But I think hand on heart, if you had those two cars, which one are you going to own for the rest of your life?
It's kind of like
MX-5. Yeah.
I couldn't. In all conscience, I couldn't step towards the MX-5, even though the reality of our lives is, we're much more likely to own an MX-5 and be blissfully happy with it. But yeah, I think the 911 is just a special thing, and they're not going to be around forever, are they? It'd be fascinating to see what the next gen of GT cars is like with some hybridisation, whether it makes them even better or whether it just the spell's broken and they're not what they were. I think
it's going to be interesting to see what as much as expensive as the ST is, there's obviously a lot of the ST in terms of the shortened gearing and stuff in the next normal GT3.
I think some of the steering components as well, and damper tuning,
should be.
Yeah, it's going to be.
That would be Car of the Year 2025.
Join us again.
Shall we record podcast 3 now? Car of the Year.
The next year's now, get it out of the way. I mean, they were talking of. The people are going to be asking why there were certain cars not in this test. I mean, the ST is there because we did want a Carrera GTST hybrid. It's the newest 911, but factors outside our control and Porsche's, I think, meant that the ST was a substitute car, which I'm sure they're very happy about. But there was also a couple of other cars that we would have liked to have had, mainly down to timing. M5, you might be thinking why it's not here. Well, the launch had taken place, but the cars weren't available in time, and same with the V12 Cylindri. The launch was just wrapping up. As we started, and Vanquish was starting as we were wrapping up Car of the Year. So
Revuelto's probably the only genuine
that's the big one.
car of this year in the window that we have. I think, and I've had the benefit of
you've had a big drive in it, haven't you?
Yeah, spent a lot of time in it, and I think it's certainly on the variety of roads and the amount of time you get to live with the car. You because they're so complex as well now, aren't they? That any car with, having just slagged off the BMW for having lots of modes, but just with a hybrid car, the different drive modes to understand incrementally what they change in the car. The Lambo's quite a thing to get your head around, but
it is understandable.
God, it's good. It's very intuitive and natural.
This is where I need to be now, and you go to it and then forget kind of.
Yeah, I think it could have won actually, because all the negatives you pick up in the sort of spec of it, it's this much higher, this much longer, this much wider, this much heavier.
It doesn't feel it.
It feels that much shorter, that much narrower, that much lighter. It feels like a Huracan. It feels like a 1,000 horsepower Huracan to me. But
are we going to put it in next year's then?
It's up to Lamborghini. They promised it to us for this year, and then suddenly had a change of heart, and for some reason wouldn't give us the car. So.
But it wasn't in any. The good thing is it wasn't in any Car of the Year test this year, was it? I don't think.
No, they pulled it from all the tests, which for whatever reason, whether it's because they feel it's not something they want to be part of, which is a shame.
It's crazy because it's such a good car. Such a good car, and I sort of feel frustrated.
I feel for the engineering team, because for them it's that validation, whether the marketing and sales team think it's the right thing. You've got a whole team of people that have created these works of art and incredibly complex pieces of machinery, and they don't have that opportunity. It's not just about them, but you would have thought you want to show that you've created the very, very best car you can, and it's being acknowledged, whether it's from us or whether it's from other tests. I think they had one in the US. Apparently they're a very different market to Europe, but whether we put
where we get whatever it is, Temerario next year, because that's next year's big thing, isn't it?
And there was a few other missing cars. We would have liked to have Z06, but it's a small operation in Europe of us trying to. The guys in Germany
that's another car that could have, from what you've said, John, about driving that.
Yeah, that would have been a good car. It would have been interesting, and a fresh take, because we haven't really had that much power in a mid-engine.
We put the request for next year in now.
Maybe we could do a half year of the car.
Front or back?
And do the
6 months
of a financial year rather than we'll start in April.
And then a few other sort of more accessible cars, Golf R and Club Sport, GTI Club Sport, the 8.5, which are a step on from the 8, but we always try to include cars that are in with a chance of finishing highly, podium contenders, and I think those of us that have driven those cars, they are they are better than what they were when they were a Mark 8, but you do worry that they would have just been
They're
there
not
to
exceptional
make up
things,
the
though, are
numbers.
they?
They're not exceptional. They're not. No, you've spent a lot of time with them, haven't you, for this year? And
Yeah,
it's
it's a decent car, but it's
good car,
not
but
exceptional.
Not exceptional. And I think that was it off the top of my head that we were. Maybe the AMG GT, but they've that's in its launch reveal cycle. I think the one we want is the Pro.
Yeah, which would. Yeah.
So that will fall.
That will fall into next year.
naturally
So
into next year.
we'll test it next year and see if it gets through to 2025 car of the year, which we need to decide where we want to do it and when.
There's a glimpse behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually planning a year in advance for once. So that was eCoty 2024. I hope you're enjoy the video. Buy the magazine, watch the film, like and subscribe to everything we're doing. We really appreciate it and it helps. We'll be back in the new year for the podcast. We're going to have a bit of a break, eating some mince pies. God knows what John's going to be eating.
Have actual mince in them.
Yeah.
That's how it started. Savoury.
So savoury mince pie.
Savoury and sweet.
So Dickie, Henry, James, John, thank you very much.
Thanks, Stu.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us this year, and we'll see you all in 2025.